All right, guys, today I want to talk about the three major loopholes that are killing real estate transactions here in the state of Idaho. I'm in the Treasure Valley specifically. The market feels different, guys, and I think more than ever, you need a smart strategy if you're going to be a seller in the Boise marketplace right now. So, in today's video, I'm going to talk about the three major loopholes. We'll break them down individually, give you an understanding of what they are, and then we'll talk about a strategy that we can implement together in order to get your house moved in today's patient, stubborn market. So I'm going to take you first into the number one loophole that's killing real estate transactions here in Idaho. And that is the inspection contingency. During the inspection contingency period of a transaction, the buyer can walk away for any reason, really. And during that period, they get their earnest money back. So there is literally no financial repercussions from the sell side to trap the buyer into that deal. So let's talk a little bit about what that inspection contingency looks like. Here are two examples of inspections that I've done on projects as we before we listed. Actually, each of these were pre-listing inspections. Now, why is that important? Well, a standard sale workflow looks like a buyer writes a contract, you say yes to it, and they have a window of opportunity to have a professional home inspection done on the house. Guys, it's a terrible idea to let the buyer find those blemishes. And in this particular instance, we had ducting down in the crawl space, as you see in the first the picture on the left here, and in the second one, we found more than 6 inches of water in the crawl space, which required advanced water mitigation and an installed pump system to keep that space dry. Now, this showing up from the buy side is a guaranteed renegotiation of value if it isn't a failed sale. And coming back to market with a listing is a bad look, guys. So taking this the next step, this is the RE10, which is the inspection contingency notice. Once the seller, or excuse me, the buyer has your home inspected, they use this form to either ask for repairs, ask for a change in the price of the home, or tell you they're going to walk away. And as you see here, the third provision is the termination provision. The buyer hereby terminates the purchase and sale agreement, and the earnest money shall be returned to the buyer. It's very important to note that there is zero financial repercussion to the buy side of this transaction, meaning the seller has no way to protect himself from this. And in my experience, you don't have to give a reason. You can just say, we didn't like what we found in the inspection. You don't technically have to point to a specific item in the inspection report in order to walk away, making this the number one loophole of exposure for sellers in the state of Idaho. The goal with this and our solution to this problem is we order, as a company, we pay for and order a pre-home inspection for every single one of our listings. We simply will not bring a house to market without a professional inspection prior to listing the home. Because why is that important? Well, first of all, we have the ability to control the cost and time frame around repairs. We don't have to fix anything. And in some instances, we sell houses without a single repair done. But knowing what is wrong with the home is extremely important before you list it. We list every home with the inspection report. And by doing so, the buyer can see what's wrong with the house before he decides to buy it. That gives us a few advantages. The first is they know what they're getting themselves into, and potentially they then have the fortitude or the courage to waive the inspection. They have the confidence, is a better word, the confidence required to waive the inspection contingency. There is a section in the purchase and sale agreement that allows you to say, I will not have this home inspected. Thank you. And if you have already seen an inspection report on the house, that's a simple box to check, and potentially you're strengthening yourself against a competitive buying scenario without having to offer any more money. So from the sell side, we strengthen our buyers by pre-inspecting the home and giving them the confidence to waive that inspection contingency, removing the number one loophole that I find is killing deals here in Idaho. Okay, the number two loophole. The number two loophole that's killing the real estate deals here in Idaho is the appraisal contingency. Now, there's a lot of nuance around that, but the bottom line is if the house does not appraise at or above list value, the buyer can walk away with no financial recourse from the seller. So it's really important that we address the issue of assessed value versus market value. The assessed value of a home is not the same thing as market value. In fact, I find the market often gives more value to homes than appraisers do. And it really does depend on the direction of the market. In a down market, sometimes appraised value is actually pretty rosy because the market's stepping down and we see appraised values looking at sold data, and appraisers only going to look at sold data. They don't look at pending information. They don't look at active information. And so if houses were selling for more earlier in the year, that can prop you up an appraisal scenario. But it's important to make the distinction. There's assessed value and there's market value. Market value is what a buyer says they will give you for your home. Assessed value is a professional assessing the market's sold data and determining the value of your home based on that information. And there's often a discrepancy between the two. I'm going to make an example of a project that I was in the middle of in 2021. Two homes built by the same builder, same floor plan, same street, and they were under contract within 2 weeks of each other. They appraised at significantly different values. One home appraised at $467,000. The other home appraised at $432,000. Both homes were listed right around $450,000. So the human component of an appraisal is real. And I bring that up because you say, well, if we know the market, we'll be safe. And that is not always true. And the market can move quickly and fluctuate with high volatility here in Idaho. And counting on an appraiser to agree with your value sometimes can be a trap. And then the buyer then has the opportunity to say, hey, thanks, but no thanks. And as you'll see in this section here, the section in the purchase and sale agreement that addresses this says if an appraisal is required by the lender, so if there's a loan involved, there is always an appraisal. You cannot borrow into a property without an appraisal. If an appraisal is required by the lender, I should say in most instances, somebody's going to comment below and say, well, there was this one time. I'm sure there's exceptions, but as a general rule, and in the conventional loan space, appraisals are required. If an appraisal is required by the lender, the property must appraise at not less than the purchase price, or the earnest money is returned to the buyer and they get to walk away. Now, a couple things happen in that instance. You can renegotiate the price of the home. The seller can stay stubborn and the buyer has to come up with the cost difference, or the buyer gets to walk away. So let's say you don't agree with the appraised value and you say, we're not moving on value here. The buyer then has to come up with the cash to cover the difference, because the loan officer will not lend above appraised value. So let's say the price is $400,000. The home appraises for $380,000. You have to cover $20,000 worth of differential to stay in that project with a stubborn seller. Or the seller can say, hey, we'll meet in the middle. I'll give 10 grand to the project. You give 10 grand to the project. I find it's a very challenging environment for negotiation because everybody had already said yes to one price. Expectations are high. Trust begins to deteriorate, and it can be a challenging renegotiation. And ultimately, it falls apart and you're back on market is a bad look. Back on market is a bad look, guys. So the goal would be visibility pricing. You're going to hear me trumpet that throughout the time we know each other. If you price your home for visibility, you do a few things. First of all, you attract the highest number of qualified buyers. If your home looks like value, more people show up. If your home looks overpriced, less people show up. Simple, right? And as a rule of thumb, I consider visibility to be, here's what I think market is. Let's get dead center on what market value of the home is. And I'll step about 3% below that in order to become the most visible project in the neighborhood. And by doing so, you attract the highest quality buyers. But on more importantly, you eliminate the catastrophe of a low appraised value, because ultimately by stepping down in value, you give the appraiser more room to work with. And if your house appraises over value, it's a great look. The buyer's super happy to be in the project. If it appraises below value, the loan can fall apart and the buyer can walk away. So I want to touch on this. An overpriced listing only comes down in value. If you price high in today's market, and the market is stepping down, it's very gradual, but we're seeing a diminishing value over time here. If you price high and miss the market, we call it chasing the market. You reduce the price and the market moves down and you're still on the high side of reasonable. But as a general, and then the market steps down again, and there you are staying on the high side of reasonable, not attracting buyers and chasing the market in a downward pattern. Days on market accumulate and eventually you don't sell the house and you cancel. Keep an eye on that, guys. But the principle here is overpriced listings only come down in value. Underpriced listings create competition to potentially drive your home's value above market value. Because if you can get people competing over the same product, potentially they want to win, and or they're in love with the home, and you can push the value of the house even sometimes past appraised value, past market value for that matter, depending on how much competition you can create. This market's a little different than we were dealing with over the last 2 years, but it is still happening that full price offers, competitive offers pushing homes above value, but also most importantly, they say, I want the house bad enough that I'll waive the appraisal contingency because you've put me in a safe environment where I can expect the value of this home to be met with appraised value rather than you were reaching. If we miss a gap here, I've got to come up with the cash. So as a rule of thumb, overpriced only comes down in value. Underpriced has the potential to exceed market value in the right environment. And that brings me to the third and final loophole that kills real estate transactions here in Idaho, and that is the financial contingency. If a buyer cannot secure lending to close the sale, the buyer gets to walk away. And guess what, guys? You don't get to keep their earnest money. Just like the last two loopholes, there is a zero financial repercussion to the buyer should they decide to terminate under this contingency. And what that comes down to is this section in the purchase and sale agreement, which is starting at line 32. Here it is. In the event the buyer is unable to, after exercising good faith efforts to obtain indicated financing, buyer's earnest money shall be returned to the buyer. There's really nothing we can do from the sell side here. It's not a renegotiation. It's a dead deal. If the financing cannot be secured, at the end of the day, the deal falls apart and you go back to market. The worst part about this loophole too, guys, is this doesn't rear its ugly head until usually the finish line is in sight. It's like the 5-yard line. This is where the ball gets fumbled. And it's a tough one because you can't say, hey, we'll reduce the price. Really, it was just the loan couldn't come through. So what's the solution there? Well, our sales strategy limits showings to weekend open houses wherever possible. Now, why is that important? If you can get more people in a room, you get a sales environment that has some buzz to it, right? First of all, we've already had the home inspected, so nobody's worried about the condition of the home. Second of all, we've priced for visibility, which is going to create more traffic at your weekend open houses anyway. And then third of all, we've pushed as many people into a selling environment at an open house as possible. You could also just say showing by appointment only. That way, as an agent, I interact with everybody who wants to show the house. And then, well, why is all that important? How can we close the loophole of a financial contingency? And the only way is in a multiple offer scenario, because if we have one offer, and even if the finances of it are questionable, it's quite possible we just have to try to ride that one to the finish line. If I can get multiple offers, we can look at our options here, talk to the lenders involved, maybe show cash against lending. There's a lot of the competition can create the opportunity to choose the highest and most qualified buyer in a sales environment. And that's what we're after, guys. By doing so, the likelihood of the loan closing goes up because you've had a chance to choose between qualified buyers and you've picked the strongest loan opportunity, the lender with the strongest narrative about their buyer, the highest down payment, the best interest rate, etc. And at the end of the day, that can ensure that your property sells. All of these things are important, and I would say each of these loopholes I've seen kill a deal, but it is really addressing all three with a strategy prior to listing that's going to help you and help your home sell. Right? So guys, if you're interested in talking with me about how to sell your home fast in this slow market, click the link below. I'm here to help. It doesn't have to be any commitment either. I just want to talk to you about your project and what you need to accomplish and put a strategy in play that's going to ensure that we get you to the finish line. It's a very interesting, volatile, sort of stubborn market right now. I've got a handful of deals. All of them are difficult, but they're all closing. And it comes down to strategy, guys. More than ever, you need a smart strategy. And I'm here to help. I've got my number down in the description below. Shoot me a text message. I've also got my Calendly link down there. Let's hop on the phone. Let's do a Zoom chat and talk about you and your home. Thanks for being here, guys. Talk to you soon.